Hello everyone, my name is Barbara and I would like to welcome you all to our latest Novedge Webinar episode. In this week's presentation, Thinking Particles 6, Ending the Dry Spell with V6 Fluid Solver. This webinar will focus on the new feature in cebas, latest VFX software, and will also touch on the enhanced features. Today's presenter is Edwin Braun. He is the CEO and co-founder of cebas Visual Technology, and he will come in on board to give you a first-hand account on what the new features of Thinking Particles 6 can do in terms of creative visual effects. Edwin himself was once an avid coder and has extensive experience in teaching creative 3D VFX. Before we get going, here's an overview of what we do in Novedge. Novedge is one of the largest online design software stores. We offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's need. Put us to the test and come visit our webpage at novedge.com. And for more daily software news and limited time promotions, keep visiting the Novedge blog and follow us on Facebook, Google+, and Twitter. Coming up next week, BIM for the small business owner. Join Catalyst columnist and Autodesk evangelist Lynn Allen as she discusses the advantages of moving to BIM on both a business and a personal level, along with some suggestions on kickstarting a successful BIM rollout. Last but not least, today's presentation is free and is being recorded live. So, if you want to rewatch this or any webinar episode, you can find it on our YouTube and Vimeo channel. Just search for Novedge. And now I'm ready to pass the baton to Edwin, and I'm going to make him the presenter. Let me just switch to you, Edwin. Here you go. You will be able to show your screen.
Okay.
And the stage is all yours, and everybody enjoy.
Okay. So, I hope you see my screen.
We sure do.
Okay, perfect. Good. Then let me start. First, welcome everyone watching this webinar. I'm Edwin Braun from cebas Visual Technology, and we are a 3D Studio Max plugin developer. And we are in business for over 25 years now, and we are doing this with 3D Studio since the first version of 3D Studio Max. Or actually, when 3D Studio DOS started, we are developing plugins for 3D Studio. I'm going to show you today the Thinking Particles Release 6, our latest version of our particle effects product. And the main new thing we have added here in this is the support for soft body dynamics and fluid dynamics as well. So far, 3D Studio Max is really weak on that side, especially fluids. There's no built-in fluid system, and also soft bodies are not really great, and we try to improve on that side. So what we have when we talk about soft bodies is one incarnation of a soft body is cloth. So I'm just playing back right now this little flag here, and as you can see, we can have wind interacting with soft bodies, for example. What we have implemented here, I'm bringing up now the user interface of Thinking Particles. For those of you who see that the first time, Thinking Particles is a node-based particle system, so everything works with these little nodes you create and connect to each other. It's a fully procedural approach to particle effects. The great thing here is it is procedural. So it's like writing your own program code so that things happen in your simulations or special effects. However, you don't need to learn a programming language. You just wire these nodes together. And let me just explain what we see here so that we have an easy start into this setup here. So we have this flag, and this is turned into a soft body. What's happening here, that's actually what's happening here. We have our object to particle, So that turns any object in a 3D Studio Max scene into a particle. So that's how we bring in stuff into Thinking Particles. What we have is a sphere and the plane here. And the plane is stored in the soft body group. That's another very important concept we have here, and I will show you later here all the time, is we have this hierarchy of particles. So every particle can sit in one of these groups, and you can create subgroups. It's up to you how you want to structure your effect scene here. So later you can access all these groups and assign specific properties to these particles only. And that's what we use here. So as I said, this plane, which is our flag, is stored in the soft body group. And here we access these particles in the soft body group. Right now we only have one particle here in this group. And in this group is the flag. And we access this particle by dragging all these little wires into our soft body operator. And that's the new thing we have in Thinking Particles 6. We do support now soft bodies. And it is as easy as you see it here. You just assign the particle to the soft body operator. So this operator here, I'm dragging up and down here, turns any particle that has a mesh into a soft body. And we have a huge set of parameters for our soft body, including what's interesting now for the case of a cloth or flag is our aero model. So we actually calculate, or we use the properties of the bullet physics engine that is able to calculate aerodynamics with soft bodies. For example, let me just move that here. I still have the settings here. We have lift and drag. So these are physical properties of a soft body that will control how much drag and lift this cloth will have. Let me just reduce this to a value of 0.1. So it will have less drag. That means that the flag will fall more down to the ground. As you can see now, it nearly collapses here, and the wind really has to use a lot of force to get the flag up. On the other hand, if I increase the drag, let me just put that to something like 0.8. And again, with physics simulation, we have to be careful not to overdo the forces. It's very easy to overdo the forces. Now you can see the opposite effect. The flag is more going upward. So that's the drag we have here. And these are only a few settings here. So you could actually create a paper plane that is physically accurate, flying through air with air resistance and lift and drag. Another important parameter we have here, or option or setting, is the wind velocity. So we can adjust the wind velocity. I'll reduce it by half, and then you will see that our flag will no longer be that wild and lifelike. And if we increase it, double the strength, we will get the opposite effect. It will blow in the wind really strong and even start to stretch the flag. Another important feature you want to see with soft bodies and cloth simulations is the option or possibility that things can tear off. We do support this. We have a very simple tear off or tearing algorithm implemented that's really fast in real time. And the thing we want to do is now, let me just give it a little bit more stretch. So this parameter gives us a more flexible cloth. So the cloth is more like a rubber. As you can see, it stretches a little bit more. And now we want to add the auto brake. So I want to tear off the cloth when a certain threshold is reached. So right now, this is the threshold of 12. So I'm going to play back now with this setting, and we will see that the cloth is starting to tear off. it is not, because I modified my parameters. I didn't stick to my things. So this tear off thing is based on physics parameters. So wherever the threshold is reached, so I can see that my threshold is too high, I'll reduce the threshold now to 10, and then we should see that the cloth where it's holding should tear off. No, it still doesn't. I still have a little issue here. I'll reduce it, and we go here. As you can see now, our cloth is tearing off. That's the effect. And again, this is all calculated in real time, what we see here. So these parameters are interacting with each other with the forces you have here. So that's one thing we have here, and also a huge improvement we have added in thinkingParticles 6 is the self-collision. Soft bodies are able to self-collide, and that's important for a cloth simulation. Let me load now a different scene, a different setup that also shows soft bodies, but now in a completely different environment and scenario. We have this box here, and what we are now doing is a soft body simulation. Let me just play this through. So the first thing you can see is this box is blown up, so there's internal pressure. So we are simulating a rubber-like material or blown up thing. And as you can see, we have proper interaction between a rigid body, the ball, and the soft body. So we have nice deformation, nice interaction between all these objects. And now I'm going to load the exact same scene, but with a little bit of modifications. And these modifications show you how drastic you can adjust the settings and parameters in thinkingParticles 6. Here we still have the same pressure-based thing, but we made it more rigid. So it is more rubber-like, and we also have an effect called volume preservation. So what it does is it tries to preserve the original volume of this object. So this is like when you blow up a balloon and you poke into one direction, you can see we properly calculate that because the hull is a soft body, the pressure or the deformation or the pressure, so to say, has to go somewhere. And that's a parameter. Let me just bring up the list of huge parameters we have here. So again, here's our setup. What we have is we turn the box object into a soft body. So we connect the particle that represents the box to our soft body here. And as you can see, we turn that easy any particle into a soft body. What we also do here is we give this box a mass so that our calculations work fine. And here we have the pressure-based setting I was talking about. This is the pressure of 100 right now. And if we were to increase our pressure, you would see that the physics simulation would look completely different. Let me do that right now. So I'm increasing now the pressure, let's say 3 times. Now the internal pressure of this box is 3 times higher. So that will react much more violent when we have a rigid body collision happening here. And as you can see, we have a much more violent reaction right now. And you can see the body itself is deforming and reacting to all this stretching and pressure control. And if I would overdo this pressure effect, let's say 600, so that's now, we have internally in this soft body 6 times more the pressure. And as you can see, it now is so strong that it tries to create a sphere out of this. But the hull is trying to keep this object together. So with this higher pressure, it will try to keep its form or shape much longer and easier. There's a lot of other parameters we have here. Let me just get back to this pressure of 100. And again, the setup is really simple and easy. So once you have your rules created, you can just concentrate on your simulation settings and simulation parameters. And that's the really nice thing in thinking particles, because it's rule-based, procedurally based. You can, once you've set up your rules, you can start adjusting your simulations. The rigid body, we can also play with the rigid body thing. So the sphere falling down is a rigid body, and we assign it, and that's also a new feature we have in Thinking Particles 6. We can now decide which particle becomes a rigid body. In the past, we had this based on the particle group, so the setting was over here in the group section. Now you can actually decide only this particle becomes a rigid body, and then you put all the rigid body settings and simulation parameters based on the particle that's created. So the particle born, that's our sphere, is a rigid body, and the same thing here is we give it a mass. So if we were to reduce the mass, we would see an immediate effect in our simulation when we have this. So right now we only change the mass of the sphere that is falling down here, and with less mass we will get a much higher bounce back from our high pressure soft body. And the other way around, we can increase the mass. Let me just increase the mass a little bit, and you will see instantly the behavior changing. So now we have a much higher mass. We can even shoot through the soft body or totally deform the soft body. And again, you have to be careful with soft bodies. It's all about forces and dynamics here. So deformations, forces that try to keep the shape, the form of the object, they interact with all other forces you create in here. There's also talking and speaking about forces. We also have one basic force that makes the sphere drop down from the sky. That's our gravity. And right now we have the gravity here. It's set to 9 centimeters. We can reduce this force, for example, to 4. And then you would see that it looks more like on Moon or Mars with a reduced gravity. So everything else will react much slower, like it was slow motion. And that's also a trick we very often use in special effects here, is if you want to do a slow-mo, you just reduce the gravity, because everything reacts much slower then, because the forces in general are reduced. Okay, so that's about the soft bodies. Let me move on to other effects we have here in Thinking Particles. Let me bring back my Thinking Particles here. Another thing we did in Thinking Particles 6 is creating joints. When you do physics or simulations, and you sometimes want to join objects together to keep them together and link them. That's what happened here. So we have all these spheres around the object, and we want to join them together. Let me bring up the setup first, what we did here, because the procedural joint creation is a new thing, and I'm going to just turn off the key thing. Without joints, our simulation would look something like that. Everything would just fall down, as you can see here. So there's no joints. The spheres are all loose and falling off, and the gravity is pulling them down. So what we can do here is the same thing. We create procedurally connections between these objects, these individual objects, as you can see here. And this is done in a procedural way. So what we did here is we collect the objects These are all the spheres. They are all in this group, particle group. And we feed these individual spheres into our GeomContact operator. And what it does is it measures the distance. And this GeomContact measures the distance between objects. And if the distance falls into a certain threshold, we will create a joint with our joint operator here. So whenever two objects, object A and B, are close together, we create a joint. And right now we are creating a point-to-point joint. So this is like a ball joint. And that's the simple way to create now joints in thinkingParticles 6. Before thinkingParticles 6, it was really a messy way. You had to do a manual p-search, find the nearest objects and all this. The new GeomContact does it all for you. You just feed in the objects, it searches which objects are close to each other, and then it outputs a contact position between these two objects, and you can create automatically a joint. So it's very effective, very easy and simple to create joints so that objects don't fall apart anymore. They will stick to each other and have a joint there. And you can choose the type of joint you want. All the types we support, these are the same types we had before. So a very important new feature in thinkingParticles 6 is procedural creation of joints. Let me show you another new great feature we have, and that's the fluid simulation. thinkingParticles 6 offers multiple fluid solvers. Right now what you're going to see is our hydrofield fluid solver, and the hydrofield fluid solver is simulating a water surface or a surface, like a pool. If you want to do a pool, for example, you would use our hydrofield. What it does is, and this is playing back in real time what we see here, is it creates automatically splashes, and it creates surface ripples or surface waves. And you can combine these surface waves with foam effects and spray and splashes as well. And as you can see here, we have these nice waves, and when they hit the edge of the cube, they will reflect the waves back in. So that's our hydrofield, and the setup is as simple as the other effects we showed you, as simple as creating a soft body. You can create the same way hydrofield. So what it does is, first thing we do is we get the surrounding in, that's the box, and we get our other box into the system as well, so that's the container and this box. Then we have the gravity, again force, downwards force, and then here comes the interesting part. Here we create our hydrofield. The hydrofield operator is this huge thing here. It has a lot of parameters. I will not go into all of the parameters, but I will explain the general idea of it. The first thing what we do here is we pick a plane, and we have to pick a plane because the hydrofield is just simulating water ripples or a surface, and that's why we would just pick this plane here. The more dense the plane is, the more detail you get in your water surface. So what we did here is we pick the plane, and then we can also pick ground objects. That would be on a shore, for example, rocks, so that the waves can interact with rocks on a shore, for example. And then we would pick our rigid object, or rigid objects, that's a particle group we pick here, and then we can have our settings for the hydrofield. That's actually the dimension and the amount of cells. I'm going to reduce the amount of cells just to show you that it will speed up the calculation a lot. However, you have to remember that you might not see it in real time because the transfer to your PC might take some time. But as you can see, with a reduced density, reduced amount of cells, we get a much faster, much more lifelike interaction here in our surface, in our water surface. And as you can see, the calculation time is also much, much faster. However, you lose some details. As you can see here, some boxing and all this. However, depending on the water surface and material you assign, it might not matter that much, and you get real nice real-time feedback on the water surface. There's many other parameters we have here, like the water density. So we do actually do a real buoyancy-based calculation. So we measure the volume of the object and the volume that is displaced to get buoyancy working. So the cube is not sinking down to the ground because of a physical effect called buoyancy. So the water holds the cube up. And if we reduce the mass, for example, of our cube falling down, just to prove my point, I'll reduce the mass, let's say, to 0.1. You will see that the box will not go as deep into the water surface. As you can see, now we only have 100 grams for this box, and it floats much, much higher in the water. So we actually do a physically accurate buoyancy calculation here. Let me just show you again. So now you can see it's barely dipping into the water. I'll increase it now to a much 2.5, and then we are back. Our object penetrates much, much deeper into the water surface. So keep that in mind when you set up your fluid simulations, that we actually use real-world parameters. You can use fancy high parameters as long as they are working relative with each other. You're fine. However, the best simulations for fluid simulation is when you use real-world parameters. Let me go back to our hydrofield. As I said, it's a really complex solver we have here with a lot of parameters, so it wouldn't make sense to kill all the time with explaining every little parameter in here. However, it's interesting to note we have splashes. The splashes you saw. We have spray. That's water created in air, so that's not created in the water, that's created from splashes. And we have foam that can float on the surface. We can all create this. And on top, we can do a full-blown ocean simulation. Let me just turn that on just for fun. I don't know if the parameters and size are fitting, but you get the idea. So now we have an ocean surface where we have huge ocean waves running over, where you can control. Let me just go to the ocean control. We have wind, we have scale, you can control the direction. Let me just scale this a little bit down. And we have wind speed, wind direction, and all this kind of stuff. And as you can see, it's pretty interactive. It's really fast. So the hydrofield is really a nice addition to thinkingParticles 6. And it's perfect for pools. You can throw in 1,000 objects into a pool, and it still works automatically. Once you have done your setup, it just works really nice. Here we have our other solver. So the first solver I was talking about, the hydrofield, is a pure surface-based fluid solver that's good for the ocean surface like pools. However, we have also a full-blown particle-based SPH fluid solver. And what we have here now is a particle-based fluid simulation. And as you can see, it has collapsed body of water. I hope you see up its path and good speed. As you can see, we automatically create foam and splashes and water flow in a real nice behavior. I think we will have an updated comparison or fluid for right PA, all the process power we get. It's really fast in multi-core systems. So if you have our fluid solver, don't worry, it's all power available in your workstation. Right now, I can see fully we move these blocks forward to create some waves and waves, collapse waves, and whenever the wave collapses, you will see nice splashes and foam. Okay, so I hope all the updates worked while I was simulating here, because that's usually an issue when you have on a workstation using up all your processors and you're also doing a webinar. That might give you a bad update on your views. So the particle-based fluid solver, let me just go in there and reduce maybe the workload. We have a particle-based fluid solver, and this is split into the main part that's just called fluid solver, and this node handles actually the fluid effect. However, it has really no parameters here. The settings or the simulation settings, they are outsourced in our flow group. The flow group controls the simulation settings. Why did we do it in that way? Why not just have the simulation settings in our flow solver? We wanted to allow you to have multiple fluids interacting with each other. And we wanted to prevent that you have to do multiple solvers and then make the solvers talk to each other. So we have one fluid solver where you can feed in multiple fluids. And the fluid itself is controlled by our flow group node. And there we just pick our fluid solver. As you can see up here, we just pick the fluid solver we want to use with this fluid setting. So still, if you want it, you can have two separate fluid solvers if you want. However, as I'm showing it now, we have one fluid solver and one fluid here with these settings. And the same thing, the fluid solver has a lot of parameters, a lot of settings that controls how the fluid behaves. We can make very dense fluid, very viscous fluid. All these settings and all these parameters can be easily controlled here. And let me just show you one effect that's happening with all particle-based fluid solvers. So I'm going back now to our creation of these fluid. That's created with a standard precision bond. That's a great thing. You can turn any particle into a fluid. So you don't need to have a special fluid particle or a special fluid generator. You can use any kind of particle. So you could use a teapot, for example, do a particle to a vertex to particle and turn that into a fluid as well. So there's no restriction on that. So what we have here is 50,000 particles. Let me just reduce this to 10,000 particles. And the first thing you will notice is that the feedback is much faster. So we will get much faster feedback. However, the behavior of the fluid will also look completely different. It will be more a thin film. However, you get this nice interaction still creating this wave and flow. However, you should be aware that the amount of particles plays a huge role in our fluid simulation. So when we are in our flow solver, we would, for example, if we reduce the amount of particles, we could easily increase, for example, that's called smoothing radius, and the smoothing radius defines how dense our fluid should be. So I have increased the radius now, so we would get more volume again, as you can see hopefully here as well. So now we have the volume again, much higher fluid level, and we get this nice interaction here. And let me just show you another example for our fluid solver, because when we are talking about fluid solvers or fluids, we want to visualize the fluids as well. Here we have two fluids that I was talking about. We can simulate fluids with different densities or different mass, and they mix and separate perfectly. So this is also physically based, and as you can see, we can do this really fast, and we can even surface the fluid really fast. You see we have this nice surface we create here in real time, and that's another new node we have introduced in thinkingParticles 6. Let me just bring up the setup here. So this is our implicit shape operator that creates an implicit surface. You have again some settings that control the surface, how fine, how detailed the surface should be, and you assign it to your particle. So we have these two particle groups, fluid 1, fluid 2, and each one of these has its own implicit surface generator. We did that because we want to control the material. An implicit shape can have its own material. So you can actually mix oil and water and assign oil-specific materials and water-specific materials to each particle. And you will see a nice, physically accurate separation of these two fluids when they mix with each other. So how did we do the two fluids? Let me go to our solver and simulation setting. So what we have here is our flow group, and we have this flow solver and the boundary. So these are the basic settings you need to have to create a fluid simulation, because we don't want to spill out the fluid out of the cylinder here or our glass, so we have to have boundaries. So boundaries are just picked as any rigid body object, and here's our flow simulation, what we have here. And how do we do the separation of the two fluids so that they don't mix with each other, so they separate? We did that in the first step when we created the fluids. We give them different mass. So the first fluid has a mass of 1, and the second has a mass of 1.3. So this actually turns out to be different densities of the fluids. So that's why one fluid is floating above the other fluid. That's how you can do this. And you can do multiple fluids. It's not only two fluids. You can have as many different fluids and as many different densities as you want. Let me show you another fluid effect we have here. Let me just load this scene here. We have particles created up here and fluids going here, very sticky fluid or high viscosity fluid going down to this narrow thing. And we implement it because it is very often important to be able to debug. Let me just move that here a little bit so that you can see what we're doing. Sometimes it's very important to debug what's going on in a fluid solver. So what we want to know is where's the highest pressure, where's the lowest pressure, where's the highest density in a solver, so we can actually turn on the visualization of what we want to show. And here you can see right now we show the pressure, where's the highest pressure. We can also show where's the highest velocity in our simulation. So we can see the lowest and highest velocity. Again, velocity is low in these areas. And we can also show where's the biggest or highest mass. However, I find that usually a visualization of the pressure is a very good indication if there's something going wrong with your fluid simulation. Because sometimes fluids tend to, especially with particle-based fluids, they explode or splash around and you don't want that and you have no idea why. Then it's a good idea to just visualize where's the highest pressure, and then you can go and search for it. Especially when you create particles, because we can use any particle, as I already said, you can use any particle and turn it into a fluid. Sometimes you create particles that are inside other particles, and that's not a good idea for a fluid, because fluids are meant to be non-compressible. So if you create a fluid particle inside a fluid particle, you create an insane amount of pressure, and that might explode your fluid simulation. So in that case, you can easily search, go down, what's the problem, and kill this one particle that is really bugging you. We have all these tools in Thinking Particles. You have always full control of your fluid simulation. Here we have another more complex fluid simulation. We have fluids and rigid bodies and buoyancy as well at the same time. So the buoyancy does not only work with the hydro field I showed you in the beginning with the surface simulation. Buoyancy also works with particle fluids. And we have this fluid streaming down here. And as the container here is filled up, you will see interaction happening with the rigid bodies and fluid. So the fluid will lift the objects up. And again, with the same thing, we are simulating and fitting. Yes, my similar voice might break up because the machine simulates very hard. Let me stop this now. You might have heard a broken up voice because we are using a multiprocessing solver approach. But you can already see here we have this nice lift on the donut here. And you see the water is interacting with this object, and you start to see buoyancy. And in the end, all the objects will be floating on top of the surface. And again, that's a particle-based fluid simulation we have here. And just to remind you about the surface-based fluid simulation, we have this scene here where we throw multiple objects into the pool. That's the hydro field. Hydro field, again, you can pick any plane, any type of plane, and turn that into a hydro field. So I'll play this back as well, and you will see these little rubber duckies falling into the pool and creating all these ripples you see here. So you can have multiple objects falling into the pool. You can have 100,000 of these rubber duckies, and you will get nice splashes and wave interaction in the pool. And the setup is always the same. You define your objects. We create the objects. How we create the rubber duckies is with a position bar. When we place it, we turn them into rigid bodies, give them the parameters we want to give them, assign them a mass. We want to have some randomness when we drop the duckies, and we want to actually use a rubber duck as a geometry, so we assign the shape as well. So these particles are created, so I can create right now, I'm doing 15 rubber duckies. I can easily go down to 5 rubber duckies. Let me go back, and if we move out here, let me just play back here. So we only have 5 rubber duckies here distorting our water surface. And again, you can fine-tune the surface, you can fine-tune the parameters, and if we wanted, we could do the same trick again I did before, where we had in our hydro field, and sorry for jumping from one solver to another, I just wanted to show you all the options and parameters we have here. So I'll turn on the ocean simulation again, and you will see when we start the simulation, you will see we already have ripples on the surface and the ocean simulation playing here. And on top of this, all your objects will probably have buoyancy with the waves going over the ocean surface. So as you can see, we have a very complex and powerful fluid simulation system here in thinkingParticles 6 that allows you to do really amazing special effects. Let me now go to another scene I have here. I want to show you with a very thick fluid, very high viscosity, and let me just play this back for some seconds here. You will see this fluid sticks like very sticky stuff. It sticks on the surface. And I want to show you what I found really amazing is with thinkingParticles together with our renderer, mosquito render. So I'm switching to active shade mode now. And I'm bringing up our renderer. If you don't know, mosquito render is our GPU-based renderer. And I keep mosquito render just open here. And what we can do now is interact with this scene. I can zoom in and I get a real-time rendering, including global illumination, shadows, refraction, reflection, everything. And I found that adjusting our ISO surfacer with this mode open, let me just bring up our ISO surface implicit shape operator. I found that interacting with that is really nice and great because you see the final rendering in here. So if I were to reduce, let me just reduce the resolution of our ISO surface. You see, now I see these edges here, very low resolution. If I even overdo it and go lower, we will see a breaking up of our ISO surface, and that shows me I can really interactively see in real time with our renderer and thinkingParticles. It works so beautiful together. I can adjust the quality of my surface for the fluid in real time. And the great thing is, if I keep on playing here, you will see real-time updates, ray tracing, global illumination, reflection, refraction here in real time. And the same is true now for other parameters. If I wanted to adjust our surface to look a little bit more accurate, I'll increase the subdivisions here for our surface, and you start seeing now nice edges, nice surfaces. And another thing we can do here is speed up the creation a little bit. We can make our surface a little bit bigger. So we adjusted this parameter here. Let me just give it a little bit more radius. So everything we do here now, we have a really big surface created here. So just as a reminder, thinkingParticles works with other renderers as well, nicely together. However, if you have a GPU render like mosquito render, you get everything on the go, in real time. You can see interactively what's going on here. Okay, I think we are getting close to our session, and again, the time was not enough to show you all the great stuff you can do with thinkingParticles 6. So I will load up my last scene here, and then we are back to questions and answers if we want that. Another thing I didn't even show you is we have spline creation, procedural spline dynamics. Let me just load this scene. In thinkingParticles 6, we can now procedurally create splines. And that's what we did here in this example. All these bands that are hanging down here, these are created splines by thinkingParticles. They are procedurally created. They are nothing else than particles. And again, the creation of the particles is pretty simple. We use our trailborn. It's a new operator we have here. We create a spline based on our trails, and we can interactively create very complex objects procedurally based on particles. And when you have splines and particles and do use them in a nice combination, you can even create veins that grow on outside of a head. Let me just show you what we do here. Zoom in a little bit. We have these splines growing randomly on the surface of this object. And the longer the simulation runs, the more splines we create. So you can create really amazing and awesome special effects just with our new spline operator we have in thinkingParticles 6. So I think I'll stop now because we're coming to the end, and we have about maybe 10 minutes of question and answers if you want to see anything special or have questions.
Sure, Edwin. Thank you so much. That was riveting. The fluid simulation was so powerful. I was seasick for a minute. But we have a couple of questions. First of all, what is the computer configuration the presentation is made on?
Oh, that's a very old Intel system. It's a dual. Let me just bring up the stats. It's a very old Xeon system. It's not the latest computer we have here. So it's just 8-core. It's a dual quad, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 8 cores running here. And that's this PC is easy 6 years old.
Right, cool.
And then I have a Titan graphics card in here for the rendering. thinkingParticles 6 doesn't use any GPU yet. We are working on our next release to add some GPU support, but for now it's CPU based only. So that's why you might have heard my voice breaking up when everything is at 100% for doing the fluid simulations.
Yes, we had a little that for a while. We were a little worried, but then he came back.
Yeah.
That's all right. I think it was just minimal. Now, the other question is, with the bullet soft body, are you able to tear on impact or even on a pressure threshold?
Yes, we have one option on impact. Let me see if I find that. The tearing is, as I said right now, it's highly optimized and very simple. But you can do that on impact. Let me see if I have on impact something. Maybe I find an example. But yes, it's possible. Any other questions? I'm just looking for.
Yeah, when you look for it.
If I find it.
Yes, the next question is, does H field work with FR ocean?
The height field has, you mean the material? Yes, yeah, it works with FR ocean, yes.
Great, and I think the questions, yeah, that's it. If you can find the material, otherwise I think you answered pretty well. I think everybody should be satisfied.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm still looking for,
Sure, yeah.
I did so many tests when we have that. But we have one tearing example where we did that, but I think I didn't prepare for that. But let me just bring up my flag again, and then we can have a look into the option. I can show you the option for allowing you to control the tearing on impact. So we go into the soft body node, that's this node here. So we have the auto break threshold that just calculates the stress on the fixed points or the stress inside the soft body. And we have another option that allows you to switch it to on collision. Then it will only break when it collides with the rigid body. So here's the option.
That's great. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Edwin. I'm sorry to have to take the screen back. I know mine won't be as exciting, but I will wrap it up for everybody. Let's see if you can see my screen now.
Okay.
I think so. Okay. Here we go. I would like to thank everybody for attending this webinar, and I want to remind you all to visit our page at novedge.com and check out thinkingParticles 6.0. If this demonstration didn't convince you to get it now, this minute, I don't know what will. So there's really nothing to think about. Novedge is the best way to buy design software online, bar none. For information on the latest specials and new releases on a huge array of design software, join the Novedge network and like us on Facebook, Google+, or Twitter. A reminder that the upcoming webinar will be with BIM for the small business owner. There's only one way to find out if BIM is the right decision for you. Join us in our next Novedge webinar with Lynn Allen. To watch today's webinar or previous webinars, check out the Novedge Vimeo or YouTube channel, and there's a lot to choose from in our playlist. Thanks again for joining us, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, Edwin. That was amazing. I went through a whole bag of popcorn, and it was really great.
Good.
Okay.
Looking forward. You're welcome.
Yes, looking forward to another webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.